Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here today with Rahul Kashyap, who has a very cool job. He's the VP and GM of Cybersecurity for Arista Networks. And Rahul, welcome. Look forward to talking to you.
Pleasure to be here with you, Ed.
Now, Rahul, you're an expert in NDR, in network detection and response. So we're going to dig into that. But before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this business.
Sure. I've been in cybersecurity for over 2 decades now. Before coming to Arista, I was the CEO of Awake Security, building out and expanding the NDR platform. Prior to that, I was the CTO of a company called Cylance, which was acquired by BlackBerry, which was on the endpoint space. And prior to that, I was at Bromium, which was a virtualization cybersecurity startup, with the Cambridge University folks from the Zen Hypervisor team. And prior to that, I was at McAfee for several years, running cybersecurity vulnerability research for McAfee Labs, as well as the intrusion prevention division as well. So yeah, I've been in cybersecurity for many years across various companies and built out several technologies and platforms. And happy to be here.
I should have taken all the money out of my checking account and just invested in you about 10, 15 years ago. I'd probably be driving a little better car right now, but it's a delight. You're one of the icons in our industry. So keep up the good work. And, I wanted to ask you, you've been a pioneer in this area of network detection and response. And you and I both know that people use that term all the time, sometimes properly and maybe sometimes not right. Maybe you could give us a little tutorial, and if there's some use cases that you can think of that would help us understand, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely, Ed. And I think as we're just talking about the legacy and the past in network security, so network security has really evolved in the last decade or so. And this is not just on the network, but fundamentally the thinking shift, as a CISO, how people are investing money. So, when we started off with the network back in the days, like 20 years plus ago, we were all looking at prevention and how do you block. You look at pattern on the IPS, network IPS, and you can block an attack, right? And it was all about IDS and IPSs. But now, given the complexity and the involved in any attack and how the attackers are targeting networks, just having a perimeter strategy of trying to block is just not going to work. First of all, because the attackers have several ways to bypass and evade those systems. And the perimeter is getting more and more diffused, for the lack of better terms. It's far harder to kind of manage your attack surface. So that's why having a detection and response strategy is very crucial, because it's not just about prevention, it's also about how do you identify an attack early on, and how can you prevent that and get the attacker out before he or she does more damage. So I think as a part of that entire refresh cycle, you have seen the same happen on the endpoint, where EDR came out and took out the traditional antivirus as well. So as a part of the entire refresh and modernizing security operations, NDR has come in a big way to kind of refresh several legacy systems which have been there for many years. So I would say that's a big movement happening in the industry as we speak. In terms of use cases that you mentioned, few use cases, first of all, would be identifying what I call as the latent attack surface. Being on the network gives you a vantage point of identifying the unknown assets that you may have on your network. And typically, we always see that many of our customers get surprised to see assets which they never knew existed in their environment, right? So that's why I call it identifying the latent attack surface, is because that is the unknown dangers which lurk around from an attacker's point of view. And then, of course, the other piece which is interesting and an emerging trend where, particularly innovative companies like Awake and Arista NDR have been, investing in cybersecurity are encrypted attacks. There's a lot of attacks which are happening over TLS. Attackers are hiding in plain sight. So how do you get smart about encryption without breaking it? So that's one more area of research and innovation which we particularly have focused on identifying attacks which are completely encrypted. So that's a fascinating area and a use case which a lot of our customers also appreciate a lot. Other pieces for NDR would be IoT devices. Okay, you have an EDR, how do you identify everything else where you cannot install an agent? That's where people like to see something on the network, trying to profile every device and every application that's working in your environment. So those are some of the use cases I would say from a detection response perspective. Then I would say some other use cases are insider risk. A lot of people use our platform to look at lateral movement. Network is the best place to identify and profile and attackers once they get in, and make sure that you catch them early on before they do and go after your crown jewels. And people use this also for stuff like third-party risk, to identify your contractors who are coming in, and also your supply chain. So this is a very good area to kind of invest in a network detection strategy, because only when you see all of these visible lurking around threats, you can actually profile and have a strategy against how to defend against them as well. Next piece is, I would say, where I'm seeing a lot of NDR use cases are come under the IT consolidation bucket. So what's happening is, if you have a platform, NDR platform, typically you can do forensics, you can do full packet capture, you can do threat hunting, querying, and at the same time, you can do proactive notification of threats. So, there are several legacy tools which, a robust platform like the Arista NDR can actually displace. So people actually come to us when they're trying to consolidate their IT and network security budget by removing 2 or 3 tools and have just one platform which can replace the legacy systems as well. So I would say those are some of the use cases and that we come across typically. And of course, as you said, cloud is one more which we hear more and more about as well nowadays.
Before we get into cloud, you said something so interesting about sort of rationalizing existing tools. Do you think there's kind of a foundational role that network security plays in establishing kind of an optimal security program, making sure that some tools are not extraneous or that things are operating the way they should? That's not the way we would normally have thought about network security, but I think you're right. I'm curious if that's what you meant, that you'd be using this to optimize other pieces. Do I have that right?
Absolutely, Ed. And I think it's because the network is actually you have a high vantage point, the way I like to explain it, because you see everything, right? It all boils down to how do you, tune and how do you finesse your AI and ML algorithms to derive value out of it. You can create playbooks for compliance. You can do, insider threat playbooks and so on. So you can, it depends on what kind of expertise your team has to kind of leverage and reduce the noise on the network. And this can be of great value from a consolidation strategy as well. And given that, as there are cybersecurity is such a crowded space, a lot of our customers particularly like the aspect of consolidation because there are very few vendors who can go and claim that, hey, I will help you reduce your tools, right? It's not just an add-on, but it's actually a reduction from an effort point of view.
So let's spend a little time on cloud. So at a very macro level, what I think you and I and everyone have seen over the last few years is we've gone from enterprise teams having a data-centric sort of hub and spoke view in the network, exemplified by billions spent on MPLS networks. I think most of my retirement, Rahul, comes from MPLS sales. But at any rate, that's now being replaced by endpoints that want to establish a zero trust session with a SaaS or cloud hosted app. That's the new network kind of smart edge and a different kind of take. It's still a massive network and you still have to go monitor it. I'm just curious, have you had to redesign or change things to adjust to these architectures, or is it just a matter of placing things in different locations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question, Ed. And one fundamental fact hasn't changed, and you will actually agree with me on this, given your background in network security, is that no matter where you are, on the cloud, on-prem, the attacker still has to traverse the network at some point. Right. So it could be either your VPN or your cloud, doesn't matter, right? So that's fundamental.
Hacking, there will be a network somewhere. That's right.
Exactly, right? So the way we look at it is that we are not really, so the way we build out the platform is, it's almost network agnostic. You can put us on an IoT network, a data center network, a campus network, or it could be just a cloud network. Now, all the major cloud providers give tapping capabilities, inbuilt native tapping. So, we can get a copy of the packets from VPCs in your cloud environments and also bring it together, right? So in fact, we are one of those few platforms which has a hybrid multi-cloud capabilities, because we see that several large enterprises are not just depending on one cloud service provider, but they have multiple, and then they have assets which are on-prem as well, right? So that really, so using a platform like Awake, you may have some users on Azure, some on GCP, some on AWS, doesn't matter, and then some on your data center, right? So we can bring it all together in a single nucleus hub to bring out analytics and derive inference from that to make it more meaningful, right? And that's a very powerful capability for a lot of our customers, because it's a single pane of glass with almost no blind spots, because you are seeing what's happening from the cloud, as well as your users who are either sitting at home or in the offices. So I believe that is going to be very critical, because we are already seeing attackers leverage hybrid kind of attacks, where you compromise, say, a user's credentials using, say, by using a, say, Chrome extension, and using those credentials to log into an AWS account, for example, right? I'm sure there are going to be a lot more hybrid attacks, because with the advent of cloud networking coming into place, networks are getting even more siloed, right? Because the enterprise network is there, the cloud network is there, data center network is there. This gives opportunities for attackers to actually lurk around and go unnoticed as well. So bringing it all together, I think, is a very powerful capability. And this is kind of how we built out the entire platform.
Well, it's an exciting time to be doing network security. And on behalf of everybody watching, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done. You've been such a wonderful contributor to our industry. So keep up the great work at Arista Networks. It's so good to see that you're doing well. And I appreciate you spending some time sharing with us today.
Thank you, Ed. Always a pleasure.
Very good. And we'll see you all next time.